So what are we talking about this afternoon? We're talking about the technology sector, and at the heart of this being the global digital economy, driving innovation, transformation, and competitiveness. Yet at the same time, the pace of change that fuels growth also creates critical human capital challenges. Companies are grappling with the widening skills gap, skyrocketing employee turnover, global competition for talent, and a shifting workforce expectations. Employees, in particular in tech, are no longer motivated solely by compensation. They are seeking purposeful work, career growth, continuous learning, flexibility, diversity, and inclusive environments that enable both personal and professional fulfillment. Hybrid work models, remote-first operations, cross-border recruitment have further intensified the talent race, making retention a strategic priority rather than an HR function. For HR leaders in the tech industry, the question is no longer about whether to adapt. It's about how quickly can they redefine HR strategies to retain critical talent. The stakes are very high. The cost of attrition, the impact of innovation, and the ability to scale sustainably all hinge on effective retrenchment practices. This afternoon, I have a panel of experts from the technology sector to help us unpack some of these strategies, the mindsets, and the innovation needed to navigate these challenges. So let's get to know our panel this afternoon, and with no particular order, Terence Mollman is the Chief People Officer at Sistro, a global enterprise resource planning software company where he leads with a passion for people, business, and technology. With over 2 decades of human resource leadership across industries and sectors, Terence specializes in crafting sustainable people strategies that drive business performance, customer experience, and employee growth. His career spans impactful roles at Smollett and Woolworths, where he has led large-scale HR transformation and operational excellence initiatives. A lifelong learner with executive education from Harvard Business School and an MBA from Stellenbosch Business School, Terence is a strong advocate for the future of work, people development, and innovation in HR. He's based in Johannesburg, and he continues to shape organizational culture and enable environments where people can truly thrive. Welcome, Terence.
Thanks, Shane.
Sure. Shifting on to Chris van der Merwe. He's an accomplished executive recruitment lead at SAP, where he oversees executive search across the EMEA region, focusing on building high-performing leadership teams within the customer success board area. With over 15 years of experience in global talent acquisition, Chris brings deep expertise in strategic sourcing, candidate assessment, stakeholder collaboration, which is all underpinned by strong understanding of the diverse EMEA market and cultures. His career at SAP spans a variety of senior roles, including talent acquisition partner, HR business partner, and he's consistently delivered impactful recruitment strategies aligned to business goals. He's also been a recipient of SAP's prestigious Hasso Platinum Founders Award. Chris is known for his hands-on consultative approach to talent strategy and his commitment to excellence in leadership hiring. He holds a BCom honors in industrial psychology and is based in Johannesburg, South Africa as well. So welcome to you, Chris. Moving on to Justin Hughes. Justin Hughes is an experienced HR executive currently leading HR operations at OpenServe, which is a division of Telkom, which you might all know, where he plays a strategic role in aligning people practices with business objectives. With over 2 decades in human resources, including a tenure as acting chief human resource officer, Justin has driven large-scale HR operations or initiatives across highly technical and operational environments, supporting national teams and complex organizational structures, all underpinned by legal and business acumen gained through an LLB from the University of South Africa and an MBA from the Stellenbosch University. A certified mediator and a fellow of the Arbitration Association of South Africa, Justin is passionate about enabling business growth and sustainability through people-centric and legally sound and future-focused HR leadership. Welcome this afternoon, Justin.
Thank you.
And last but not least, Colin Mbabansi is a dynamic technology and business leader recognized for driving innovation, safety, and trust across Africa's mobility and tech ecosystems. He is the current head of platform safety for the Middle East and Africa for Uber. He leads transformation programs that prioritize user safety, digital trust, and responsible growth. With over a decade of impact spanning financial services, insurance, and technology, Colin has pioneered initiatives in fraud prevention, cybersecurity, and community empowerment, earning him a spot in the Mail and Guardian's 200 Young South Africans for 2023 for tech and innovation. His leadership has influenced national safety policies, gender-based violence prevention campaigns, and road safety strategies in partnerships with key institutions. A computer science honors graduate from the University of Pretoria and a current student of the Power MBA, Colin blends technical acumen and strategic foresight to champion inclusive, secure, and scalable innovation across the continent. Welcome to you too, Colin. Now,
Thank you.
Fantastic. And probably a great place to start our conversation this afternoon, colleagues. And yes, it's a male-dominated panel this afternoon. Unfortunately, some of our female colleagues that were meant to join on had some unfortunate opportunities to get back into work or key priorities. But we do have an engaging afternoon between ourselves. So a great place to start again is probably to start focusing on some of the unique challenges that the technology sector kind of faces in trying to attract and retain talent compared to other industries. So I'd love to get your thoughts on that. And let's see who's first to jump into the pot with their insights.
I think we should.
Right, I see Terence go up, so fantastic, Terence. And I think, Justin, I saw your hand up as well. So as I'm done with Terence, I'll hand the floor over to yourself, Justin. Terence, please feel free.
Thanks, Shin, and thanks and hello to everyone. I think something that we really find hard is that as a business and at CISPRO, we've have, for example, introduced an internship program where we take not graduates but matriculants, and through a very well-structured program, train matriculants to become software developers. And as we stand today, 70% of our developers have come from this program, right? But we have seen a deterioration of accessibility of those skills that over the last couple of years, we have reached a point that when we open these internships, we receive between 4,000 and 6,000 applications, and we find a really hard time to appoint 10 people into one part of the program, as an example. So I think, if you look at that challenge, right, and the social circumstances within South Africa, that is deeply concerning, that the success rate of being able to find people and a willingness from us as an organization to invest in people who do not have the formal qualifications to perform certain technology functions and invest in that. But we have been left with a situation that even with that intention, it becomes highly challenged, right? So I think for us, the skills availability is quite concerning. The retention with some international organizations realizing that there's good talent and good valuable talent in South Africa and stretching their tentacles into our talent market cross-border. And then our ability and how we need to change our strategies to drive reskilling and upskilling, because the technology obviously changes extremely quickly. So how do we build those strategies and capabilities internally to meet those skills requirements through upskilling and reskilling of the workforce? So I would say that those for us are some of the current talent challenges within in the technology landscape.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks, Terence. So I think some critical things that pop out is that skills availability. So I guess you guys are doing some really great stuff in terms of trying to create opportunities for individuals going forward, taking people out of or coming straight off matric and trying to find those opportunities through a learnership. So fantastic stuff there. But then again, what I'm hearing is that skills availability is still a bit of a challenge, right? Not just here in South Africa, as you spread your feelers across the continent, that becomes a bit of a challenge. And then the strategies that you have to have behind that to upskill and reskill also need to kind of keep pace with the rate of change. And that also poses the challenge. In actual fact, I was writing a thought piece this morning around exactly that. How do we kind of upskill the current workforce so that we can kind of adapt? But it was kind of focusing on academia and partnership between academia and business. And the biggest challenge academia has is that it doesn't change fast enough. So we still, I mean, if you get into a BCom is still talking about the same things from about 10, 15 years ago, with maybe some changes in terms of case studies that you currently have in the syllabus. But the content is still kind of the same. You get into a technology qualification, again, content is still the same. It hasn't rapidly changed to align to what is currently needed in terms of either the coding courses or that sort of thing. So there's a bit of work to do between business and academia for academia to support business in its drive for the right strategies to upskill and reskill the staff. So thanks again, Terence. I think you're pointing out some really key challenges. So we'll jump over to Justin. I saw Chris's hand go up, and then Colin, I'll give you the floor thereafter. So Justin, yeah, floor is yours.
Thanks, Nishan. So I think your comments dovetail into the sort of approach, and I share what Terence has said. Look, there's the normal business pressures that we have, financial, ensuring that your staff availability has the correct skills, the capacities there, and so on. But I think one of the challenges we do have, and this is going to talk about your academia and business, is experience. So we will take in maybe a graduate or maybe a matriculant, and we would need to nurture that person for a number of months or years in order to build up some form of experience that they become a fully contributing member of the company. So we've also got various internships that we have, and ours are aimed at different levels. So we have internships aimed at matrics, we have internships aimed at undergrads or recently graduated undergrads, and we have internships for postgrads. And they each follow a different path that we put there. But the idea really behind the initial internship or learnership program is to provide experience and build up experience. And and that leads then to a further challenge that we experience, is that there's because of the limited skills pool that is available, particularly within the technology sector. I think the other sectors must also experience similar things, but technology moving the way it does, and what the youth of today were born with cell phones and iPads and so on in their hands. So they adapt to this technology pretty quickly. Is that then obviously there's a fair bit of, I'm going to call it cross-pollination between businesses in the sector where, again, I'll go back to the finance where perhaps better financial opportunities are offered to recently experienced graduates or matrics. So that's what I find. And then just the last point is that, because we're asking about how do you attract, retain this talent when it comes in, is that I find that the feeder pool that is coming in is quite certain what they're looking for in a company. And first of all, that they're mobile. The world has opened up. We'll probably get in the discussion later about remote work working for international companies. Doesn't matter where you're based. If you've got the skill and you've got the right attitude to have that skill provided, then you can basically work from anywhere. So we're not only competing locally, we compete further afield, and then also that there's not a lot of leeway what you offer, in the sense that if a prospective, let's call it a young employee, comes in and they're quite clear what they're looking for, they will tell you, this is what I want. I want flexible working hours, or I want longer leave, or I want this and that. And whether our policies, to get into the Terence mentioned companies adapting, whether our policies are quick enough to change and say, all right, we can change our system slightly, which can accommodate that particular request. So yeah, I think we sit on quite an exciting time in the employment area. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Justin. I think you're echoing quite a few kind of comments that I've received over different panel sessions that we've done fairly similarly across different industries and sectors. We've done manufacturing, we've done finance, and the responses are kind of similar in that sense, in that they have quite a few challenges in terms of retaining talent in the environment. But also there's a global competition for this talent. Because our borders are kind of fluid nowadays, you could pretty much be here in Johannesburg working for an organization out in the UK, or out in Asia, or out in America. And those pose quite a few challenges to us, because how do we retain that talent here in South Africa so that we build South African organizations, or build organizations on the continent, right? So those are probably some things that I'm hearing coming out from your side. Financial opportunities. So people obviously do chase after the better financial opportunities. I think we see it all the time. And it's difficult in that sense to try and balance the budget at the end of the day with the talent that you actually need, right? Because we know it's at the end of the day, as much as you want to go and grab the talent, you also do have a finite budget, right? So if it was infinite, it would have been fantastic. But now trying to bring that balance in also kind of poses a bit of a challenge, apart from the ways of work, which you have referenced. And yes, we're going to dig a lot more into that as we go along, and understanding how those ways of work need to change. How does it affect strategies and policies? But fantastic. Thank you for those insights there, Justin. So yeah, let us jump across to Chris, and then once we're done with Chris, Colin, I'll give you the floor.
Thank you, Nishan. Firstly, I just want to thank you for the introduction. I think from now on, I want you to do all the introductions. I'll take the recording. I think twofold is the answer. Firstly, I think to Terence talking about skills, I'll come to that, but I think you need to look at the industry first from a technology perspective. Obviously, we in it, we at the top of it, and we understand the war on talent, not only from a graduate perspective, from a senior leadership perspective as well. The professional, the technology industry has the highest turnover of any industry. If you look globally, the average is around 10%. The technology average turnover today is around 14%. And that also means that people are jumping more because the opportunities are more, 2-3 years, and then they jump to a new opportunity. So your approach, us as a company, we are changing in terms of the way that we recruit. In the past, I think, looking at the technology and the computer industry, it was very experience driven. You're going to have to focus on skills. What makes an impact immediately? How can you assess those skills immediately? How can you look at your return on investment in a very short term? And I think this is where we see there's the traditional education industry is struggling to keep up. It's 2 to 3 years behind what we are doing as a technology industry. Today we have GPT-5, tomorrow 6, 7, 8, and then the industry is still doing the BCom, right? So somewhere that they need to pivot. And then there's various other initiatives that we'll talk about that we need to attract employees by, or candidates with, but obviously to retain employees as well. I think secondly, Terence, maybe just to mention this as well, we ran, so with SAP, as customers and new customers look at the technology, the one feedback over Africa was that there's a skill shortage, they invest in the solutions. You have global consultants that come and implement these solutions if there's a skill shortage. So we ran a program across Africa where it's called Skills for Africa, and it's still running today, where as customers and companies invested in our technology, we then gave them the opportunity to certify in that specific technology, and then some of our partners had to give them internships to go get hands-on experience immediately. And this was focused on unemployed graduates. And again, just into what you said, and Terence, we ran it the first year, we maybe got 1,000 applications. It just goes up and up and up from there, but we don't have the availability of jobs. But those people make an impact. So once you then give them the skill, then they open their environment to other opportunities. Now you need to see how you retain them. Is that through hybrid work? Is that through incentivized programs? Because Gen Z is different to millennials, all of those things. But we'll get into it. But that's my 2 cents.
Thanks for that, Chris. So I think some important things there, right? The talent war is across levels, and that's one of the biggest things that I kind of picked up there. The other thing is your point around academia being about 2 to 3 years behind, and that's a critical factor, right? We kind of mentioned this a little bit earlier. So interestingly enough, I kind of focus on a model called a triple helix model. So this is a model that's implemented in the Nordic region. It is government, academia, and business coming together. Government creates the policies and opens the doors. Business funds kind of the innovation or the research piece of things. So they bring the capital into the opportunity and obviously the execution of ideas thereafter. Whereas academia does a lot of the research and that sort of thing to shape the future of organizations, to shape the future of skills, etc. And it works really well in those Nordic regions, which is why if you look at it, they're leading when it comes to medical research or medical innovation. They're also one of the richest regions across the globe, which is very well known. But it's because these 3 factors come together very comfortably. In South Africa, we have a little bit of a challenge, right? And the challenge that we have is that we have business and academia kind of coming together. But when it comes to policy creation, that becomes a little bit difficult. So, for example, government as an example, when you go through registering a qualification, sometimes to register a qualification, it takes you 2 years. By the time your qualification is registered, the market has shifted to your point, right? So there's a few things that need to change in that process that will allow academia to move a little bit faster with qualifications that change rapidly. But again, if we think from an innovative perspective, does it have to be qualification-based? And why can't we move towards micro-credentialing? So short, sharp, quick learning opportunities that people can build the skill that we need very quickly to shape to the world that you want to build or the business that you want to build. So again, yes, we have challenges in our environment, but there are ways to kind of work around that. So fantastic. Thank you for those points there, Chris. Colin, let's open that floor to yourself, sir.
Yeah, thanks, Nisha, and thanks to my fellow panelists. They're raising very important points. So maybe let me start by saying that I do have an unfair advantage because I had a very interesting career in a sense that I did graduate programs. I was part of the Innovation Hub cohort that was brought in by academia, government, and corporates, so that they can nurture talent and all that. So I've had an opportunity to go through different career paths and see how decisions influence the talent on the ground. So 2 points that I want to touch on. And Nishan, maybe I'll pick off from the last point that you just made on academia and skills. So there is a very interesting opportunity that corporates have to influence policy at a strategic level. Coming together with academia and working with government creates practical output in terms of what kind of talent do you look at. So I'll give you a practical example about myself. When I was doing my final year at University of Pretoria at the time, I was planning to do my honors. So when I was accepted at Coach Lab to come and do my internship, University of Pretoria was starting to introduce cybersecurity. So when we went to do that, to learn that, I didn't know that it's going to pave my way into a cybersecurity specialist in the bank later in my career. But it was introduced at a very early age as one of the courses that we need to explore. Government want to look at this, academia want to look at this. What I'm trying to say is that the point that you're making, Nishan, in terms of policy decision making and influencing policy. Corporates in South Africa has a way big opportunity to influence that, because you can be able to take things that you are struggling with and go introduce them at academic level, especially in the tech space. You go to every university, for example, final year students and honor students and master students, they do what we call final year projects. So you can literally take an AI project that you are trying to explore as a corporate and give it to a university as a project and fund it. And the solution you can actually incorporate into your business and over. So there's a big opportunity for strategy in corporate linked with academic and government. One last point that I wanted to make is talent retention. So to retain top talent has always been a problem everywhere. And the globalization of our corporate hasn't helped us in any way, because now I can work for Google sitting here in South Africa. I don't have to move to the US to work for Google, for example. But one thing that I've seen with top talent is they value many things more than money. In fact, money is important, but they value more things like latest technology, being able to access things that are maybe 2 years ahead in the industry. Being able to access those particular things makes them more comfortable to work with you within corporate. And autonomy, for example, working on projects that I think that whatever that I'm doing today, I'll be able to put it in practice and it can expand globally. And this is what I've seen in my current employer. So the things that I do here in South Africa, you can find them in San Francisco. You get my point. So that makes me feel like, okay, cool, I'm doing something that is impacting the world, even if I'm sitting in my corner in Johannesburg, things like that. So yeah, that's going to be an interesting discussion. But my last thoughts would be everything that the team is raising is quite important. And I don't think there's going to be one answer that will solve for everything. Thanks.
Fantastic. So thanks, Colin. So what I'm hearing is if we think craftily or innovatively around it, business has many opportunities to inform academia, and the outputs of that can come straight back into business. We don't necessarily have to wait for the policies to actually change. So again, I think you're actually talking to what is part and parcel of what I try to do every day, right? And interestingly enough, we have partnership with a business organization in the engineering sector. They were actually on one of my panels previously, and in this partnership, what they're actually doing is they're funding the engineering students that are on our programs. So they're paying for these bursaries for these individuals to go through this 3-year program. But they continuously engage with these individuals, and to your point, throw them different opportunities from a work perspective for them to solve and resolve using the education and knowledge that they have. And I think this is one of the interesting points which we also have to understand, is that these academic programs that we have, we throw people into those academic programs. They're meant to teach them content. Sometimes the content doesn't have to be relevant and current information, but what we are or should be teaching them is how to apply knowledge. So take what you have and then take it into the context where you are and apply it. That application piece is what leads to innovation. And I think that's one of the pieces that you are critically talking about, is in a project world, give them the project, get them to apply the knowledge. It may not be the relevant knowledge that they have, but they will do the research in the application of the project. And that's what then starts making it current. And I think some of the other things you kind of pointed out, which we probably are going to continue to dig into, is what else retains talent, right? And you spoke about autonomy of work, work that's impactful and purposeful, and the pride and the pleasure that gives you, because I can hear the pride in yourself when you talk about the projects you've worked on, and then it's being something that's kind of globally recognized. So thanks for that, Colin. But it kind of takes us to the next question I want to throw to you guys as panel, right? We in a hyper-competitive environment when it comes to a digital world, right? Global companies can recruit from anywhere, and these are the points that you've already kind of highlighted. You have a challenge here in South Africa, but now you're working across borders, and Google can come in here and find the right talent, and you don't need to go to Google in America, but to be able to work for them, right? You're working here from the continent. So how can this local or regional tech firms that we are operating here on the continent kind of attract high demand talent, right? So this is really about the traction part. We've spoken a little bit about retention, but how do we pull these people into our organizations? love to hear your thoughts on that. Okay, Chris, I see your hand popping up there, so let's open the floor to yourself.
Yeah, I think again you have to take maybe a couple of years back post-COVID when everyone turned to 100% remote work. I don't think that's the reality anymore. I think in the technology space we are moving to a hybrid environment where there's expectation to be in the office and to create the culture of working together. But if you think about the competitive landscape in the technology sector, that is one of the most sought after benefits is that hybrid work environment. And especially in South Africa, given the infrastructure, traffic, etc., I think that pulls a lot of people towards you. We also see it from a retention perspective that retention is higher when you have those things in place. I think the other thing that it's not just about attracting people, it's about retaining. So in terms of attraction, money is important, but you have to look at the generational differences. I spoke earlier about Gen Z and millennials and all of that. If you think about HR programs that you need to put in place, they are significantly different. Millennials, they look at good career progression, recognition, all of that. Gen Z, it's all about using their skills immediately, having an impact, and then looking at learning to develop further. So if you take that to pull them in, is on the other side, how do you retain them? And that comes into the AI discussion, right? You need to have software, or you need to have a program in place that curates learning programs and looks at analytics in terms of development, succession, etc. And that then creates that environment for people where they believe they are valued. But it goes both ways. But you're 100% correct, right? We, as an organization, just to give you some insight, we're 110,000 people. We function in every single country and city, big cities in the world. So you can do the job from anywhere. I think SAP in South Africa, I think once you taste our steak, drink our beer, watch our rugby, you probably want to work from South Africa. And we can offer that. But the mobility piece is really important.
No, fantastic, Chris. So some interesting points that you mentioned there, right? And I think the biggest thing that I pick up there is that generational differences. And that's one of the things to kind of look and focus on in shaping our strategies to actually attract this talent, right? So yes, money is on the table, but how do we build these environments that are conducive for them to want to come into, right? And I think that's a critical thing, and highlighting that. I think if we look back at the Google example, people raced into Google because they had this culture that people actually wanted to be a part of. They wanted to be a part of that mission, a part of that journey. The way that Google shaped its environment was critical to attracting the talent that they needed. And interestingly enough, I did a visit out to Google, and the first thing that they said to me was, because everyone knew what Google used to do, and that was how they used to attract talent, they got to a point where the competitors actually started doing exactly the same thing. And what was their competitive edge now no longer was a competitive edge. So now they would do things, but the only time that they would share information about that environment and that culture is only through the recruitment process. And they tended to keep things kind of confidential in a sense, or not as transparent as it was in the past, to try and attract talent, which is a very interesting concept. But yeah, I mean, I'm very familiar with SAP. So my father is a SAP programmer, or used to be a SAP programmer up until the point that he retired. He worked for 47 years with Unilever as one of the SAP programmers, and he took old technology and was able to adapt COBOL into SAP, and then the skill that he had became one of those critical skills. But then again, he was the older generation, and now you have the younger generation coming in. And I think one of the important things I kind of want to highlight here is we have the generational divide, but the younger generation coming in, given some of the knowledge and the experience of the older generation need to learn. So the younger generation needs to learn from the older generation as well. So a lot of things that you kind of mentioned there in terms of this attraction is that ability to be able to get into what is relevant in the current environment, the right types of environment to be able to learn and grow and adapt from. And it's up to the organization to provide that to the individuals. So thank you for that, Chris. I saw Colin's hand up, and then I see Justin. So let me jump to Colin, and then Justin, I'll jump to you.
Yeah, no. Chris is raising very good points. So thanks for that. So when you're dealing with talent attraction, what I've picked up is there is value in investing in the meaning, right? What do you stand for as an organization? The culture, right? What problem are you solving in the greater scheme of things? Where do we locate you as an organization? And this start to make sense, especially when you are dealing with the Gen Z talent pool that is coming into the work industry, because these are people who are well learned, as Justin already said. They grew up within the technology space. They use technology, so they are bombarded by information. So there's nothing that happened globally they're not aware of. The trend setters, for example. So you cannot be an organization that stands for something and do something that contradicts, and you expect that you're gonna attract very good talent. And some of them they've got their own fundamental values. For example, things around environment. Some of them they've got like very set values to say, I want to work for a company that is doing XYZ, maybe to deal with global warming, for example. You get my point. So your ability to match your company values and the meaning that you're trying to achieve, like what is your mission, what is your vision, and can I as a talent take your values and apply them on my day-to-day basis? You get my point. When for example, when you say you are reimagining how people move, is my work day-to-day influencing how people are moving? If that's your value or that's your mission, but it's not practically visible, I can tell you now, the new generation will tell you straight up. This is the generation that you can hire them today, and then they resign tomorrow, and they'll tell you this is not what you said in an interview. So you're not dealing with people who are like very inward looking as well. They are very outward looking. They will tell you honestly to say, no, this is not what you promised me during the interview and all that. So yeah, we're in a very tricky situation. But maybe one point that I want to sort of make as well is organizations need to start to be creative in terms of how you remunerate these people. Because generational wealth is starting to become a very important topic among youth. You get my point. We're living in a situation where some of the youth in other markets or other countries, they're not as wealthy as their parents, and they don't seem to be going to achieve the wealth that their parents have achieved with the same level of work, sometimes in a much better role than your parents. You get my point. So you want to also bring in the aspect of, okay, instead of promising somebody X amount of figure, can I build in things like your equity as part of how I attract talent? Because that becomes important, because I know that, okay, if I've got this component of equity, as much as I'm earning ads, it means that in future when this thing grows, I'm also getting wealthy. I'm a co-owner in a sense. You get my point. Incorporating that co-founder mentality in the employees that you bring into the organization, so that organization knows that they're not just working for a shareholder, they are the shareholder. You get my point. Responsibility, your ability to push an extra mile, because you know that I'm not just working for a Nishan who's sitting somewhere. I'm part of the Nishan group as well. You get my point. So yeah, that's what I want to make.
So fantastic. And let me just pick on the last point before I jump to some of the other stuff that you're talking about, right? The remuneration piece and the creativity that sits around that. Interestingly enough, the Regenesis board actually thinks along the lines of the way you're thinking, that it's not just about the remuneration itself, but it's about the purpose, the intent, but also making people feel, well, not feel, but giving people that ownership from an accountability perspective, which drives them to work that little bit harder, that little bit extra, because at the end of the day, you're doing it for yourself, right? Apart from the organization itself. So that creativity that comes around remuneration is actually critical. Kind of says to me that at some point I should be doing a session around rem and reward, right? In terms of how we should be shaping and thinking about talent. But a lot of the stuff that you mentioned earlier on focuses on EVP. What's that employee value proposition, right? What do we share out with individuals that once to bring them into the organization, right? What is our purpose? And that's what I heard you talking about. Do we know who we are as an organization, that we can put that down as our as a point of EDP, or create our policies around that will attract people to the organization? Is the work meaningful and purposeful? And I think you would know by now, organizations are on the bandwagon of purpose at the moment, right? Everyone is shaping their purpose statements. It used to be mission statement and vision, right? The mission statement and vision statement has now kind of evolved into that purpose. Are we shaping for the world? Are we shaping for, or just shaping for profit, right? So the whole focus on sustainability and building organizations that are sustainable in every shape or form, so that the next generation or the next generations after us are able to enjoy the same level of satisfaction that we would have gotten, right? But in a more sustainable way. So, Colin, some fantastic points there. Thank you so much. I think it was Justin that we were going to jump to, so let's jump to Justin.
Thanks, Nishin. Yeah, so it's actually quite difficult to come in as the third speaker after the other two, because they've pretty much covered a lot. But I think let me have a look at a couple of things that's been said. And there's one thing I like what Chris said. I think the challenge from an HR point of view is how one drives it, and that is, the trend is moving towards a focus on skill and not necessarily experience, because the youth coming into the employment arena now, digital technology is almost secondhand to them. So they understand that now it's a case of what do we do with it. The challenge on that is, certainly from a business point of view, is that my customer base in the business side, they want someone who comes in and is running. They tell me they don't have time to spend, but the long and short of it is that there has to be some form of collaboration between the business and those coming in. But I would run with the skill side and say that the job is to provide opportunity. And I've addressed many intern groups, learnership groups, where basically the mantra I try and put across them, the company I work for is very diverse. You can have a single career, a diverse career, in a single organization. It's so diverse, and the opportunities are there. It's a question of the individual using the opportunity. And I've listened to Colin on the ownership side, and we do have that as part and parcel of our offering. However, the challenge on that, and this is maybe just a theory I carry, that if one looks at your work life cycle, when you start working, what is important is money. You need to buy a car, you need to fund those Friday nights and bras and rugby that Chris is talking about. And as you evolve in your career, so you have maybe settled down, have a family, you need some form of cash that you are able to do the schooling and that. And as you reach the pinnacle, so the money side is not as important. It's always important. People work for money, but it's not as important to those that have now, the kids are moving out of home and so on. So one needs to look at that life cycle and say, what is it we offer? And share ownership probably becomes quite important when you get to your second phase. So you come in, you need the experience, you develop the skill. Second phase is I'm starting to establish myself. I now need something from a company point of view to retain this particular individual and give them a stake into what I'm offering. And then just lastly on what Colin mentioned, and I certainly, I've mentioned that you've got to provide opportunities to grow. And one of those is to put the entrant employee onto a project where they can live out what their thought patterns are, where they can live out what their skills are, and that they can contribute and see that and nurture that project from foundation right through to the conclusion of that project. And that to me is if I take my experience of speaking to young employees, is that seems to be quite a lot of gearing, is to say, give me something that challenges me and I'll show you I can do it. And then you can have a look at a project. We are part of a crowd, SATNAC, where we bring in postgrads, give them a project, and they present annually at the SATNAC conference. It's coming up now, I think, in about 2 or 3 weeks. So that seems to be the way to attract. And retaining, I think, is to try and chart the employee career, that at specific times in the career that you are offering something, and it need not necessarily be financial. It can be something else that brings in the work-life balance that people require, a little bit of extra time or a bit of flexibility in terms of how their workday folds out. Than to back in the day where you started at 7:30, and even if you got there at 10 past, you didn't clock in until 7:30 because you threw out the books and the system. Now you know that you get that flexibility.
No, fantastic. Thanks, Justin. So some interesting points there, right? There's this juxtaposition between having skills and being able to come into the business environment and hitting the ground running without necessarily having that experience, and trying to balance that out. And something not easy for organizations, because, I mean, like yourself, I mean, you listen to business and business says, I've got a project deadline. And the project deadline says, I need to deliver this project in 6 months' time. So the skill I need is somebody coming in here, and not a development skill, a developed skill, to be able to come in and do what I need to do, right? But I'm hearing some interesting things in terms of what you guys are doing, right? Which is actually the innovative programs to go to the universities, postgraduate students, giving that kind of an opportunity to work on some of these projects, and then giving them that experience in a sense. And I think we kind of heard that also early on in the session. So fantastic on that, right? But at the same time, it also kind of begs the question in terms of how we develop, and we spoke about academia a little bit earlier on, right? And we're developing a skill here, and the world is moving towards building skills, and it could be skills in a particular area. It's not like how we went through varsity and we learned like 5 different things, and when we came into the workspace, we applied maybe one of those things, right? The world has now shaped that you focus on a particular area. So if you look at medicine, you go through some generic stuff in your first 2 to 3 years, and then after that you start focusing on specific things, right? And that's how most of the international qualifications are kind of built and focused. You focus on a particular area and you become a specialist in a particular area. And when you're done with that, and if that skill shifts or that area shifts, you build the next level of skill. So it's kind of talking to what I mentioned earlier on micro-credentialing. But the world is shifting in that way. South Africa isn't there. We're still focusing on qualifications rather than building a particular skill that will shape our business very quickly. So again, that's one of the challenges we have to try and manage within the context we operate in, which means that some of our policies also kind of need to shift and shift away from building qualifications to actually building skills and capabilities that we actually need, not necessarily through a qualification that takes 3 years for an individual to work through, right? Do it quick, do it sharp, 6 months, learn a skill, go and start implementing and applying it. Justin, I see your hands up again. Let's give you that floor.
Yeah, so you've triggered me. It's a point that Chris had also triggered me on, is that quite often I think our job descriptions or our recruitment, people seem to put an ad out for a particular position, and it's about a 4-page JD of what you are going to be required to do. And when you really go into that job, you'll find that maybe the first 4 lines is what's really applicable. And I think because of that, we do focus on, you must have this qualification, you must have that qualification. The world has changed. when we were at Varsity, you were taught, some of the degrees were very generic, but you were taught particular things. And if you wanted to learn something further, you went to the library. And, one of my downfalls was I never listened at school to the Dewey system, so I had to walk up and down the library shelves to find a book that sounded like the title was right. These days, you simply put a thing into a search bar and you get 15, 20, 200, 2,000 documents or articles or opinions on a particular topic. So we really are moving into an era where you mustn't assume that because the person is 1 year, 2 years, 4 years out of school, that they don't have knowledge on a host of topics. And therefore, I think JDs need to be relooked at and geared towards the skill, to Chris's point, rather than the qualification. There are things, if I go for a hard job, I'd prefer the guy to have graduated from a university with a medical degree. But in certainly in a large portion of the businesses, do you need someone who is going to, in our job, roll out a network? Does the person need a degree? That's a question. Or does the person need an MBA? So we really need to have a look. How do we write up our jobs and put them out to attract that talent?
Awesome. Thanks, Justin. I think you kind of hit it spot on there, right? I saw as you started speaking, Terrence's hand popped up. So let me go over to Terrence because I'm sure he's got a point to make on that.
Thanks, Shane. So I think you're absolutely right. And I think our ability to empower our organizations and our people and our teams with on-demand learning, right? Because how do we assist people not necessarily to solve problems, but to understand how problems can be solved? And that leads to considering the type of people that you employ in the business and the type of skills that we would like to see our schools and our universities help us instill in people, is then to say, how do I develop my critical thinking so that I really understand the problem? And I think, Justin, to your point, if you need heart surgery and the doctor on the day is not available, there's technology now that somebody can phone in from another location and use robotic technology to perform that, right? So the staff in that particular facility must then understand what I need to do in order to continue to help this patient. And I know it's a bit out there, but it's happening today as we speak, right? And I think those type of skills then talk about the fundamental skills that we build, right? So the skills is no longer to do the job, but understand what job needs to be done and what's available to me to get the job done. And that for me is the critical skills that we need to instill in our people if we want to build successful organizations and communities in the future. Just imagine Henry Ford starting his business, right, so many years ago and putting a job out to say, I want a mechanic, I want a car builder. Car builders didn't exist, right? He had to employ skills of people that didn't exist at the time when the first atomic bomb was built. They didn't advertise and say, hey, I want a nuclear bomb maker. They had to look for things that didn't exist. And I think that's our challenge in the business today, is that we are employing people into jobs that doesn't necessarily exist in the marketplace, right? So what fundamentals do we need to look at in building people? And that's where AI comes in, right? Is I don't necessarily have to know what to do. I just need to know how to solve that problem. And that then brings the whole question around what is my role then in an AI world? And I often, when I coach and mentor people, saying is that, are you going to make AI look good because you're using AI to solve your problems? Or is AI going to make you look good? Are you going to use AI to make yourself look good, right? And I think those are the type of skills that we need to think about as an HR profession how do we build curiosity? How do we build critical thinking? How do we build those skills? Because those skills will then lead to technical and operational execution on the other end.
Okay, fantastic, Terence. As you were speaking, you kind of reminded me of a little talk that I kind of saw recently. It was the CEO of NVIDIA, and he was talking about skills and artificial intelligence taking away jobs from the environment. And his point was, it's not artificial intelligence that's going to take the job. It's going to be the individual that knows how to use the artificial intelligence that will take your job. So I think it's kind of talking to about the environment that you create, the opportunity for people with the right tools and how we provide them with the right tools to be able to do the job that we expect of them. But then also to be able to create the narrative around the job. What is the job that we actually want them to do? And then I think all of those things are what leads to attracting people into the environment that we're looking for. So thank you for that. I think I saw Chris's hand pop up. So Chris, let me jump to you.
Yeah, I think just to add on what Terence is saying, I think it's really important to look at the skills aspect in terms of bringing those people in, identifying the need for skills. But what a lot of people don't focus on is the leadership element. You know, what a lot of companies, especially in the technology sector, what's happening these days is you have startups that disrupt. They come to revenue with a lot less people using AI than traditional companies took decades to do. And those leaders and those organizations grew up in those business from low-level positions and going up to really senior positions within 2 to 3 years. And now you want to attract those individuals that disrupt to your organization. They come with a different leadership style, they come with different skills, different thinking, they come in to disrupt. So it's really important to focus on the skills, but it's very important to understand the leadership philosophy you have in your organization. Because where organizations are going is you're going to have a clash, not a clash, but you're going to have a combination of those two. You're going to have institutional knowledge and you're going to have disruption happening inside your organization. So using AI in terms of curated learning plans, because in the past you'll have everyone still needs to do all the normal trainings in terms of whatever, but then there's going to be curated trainings that is specific to your job. And AI will curate that based on your learning journey. AI will curate that based on where you want to go. So, and then you need to look at the leader, the kind of competencies that's required for him to support your development. So, you know, it's really important to focus on the skills, but don't disregard the leadership element that the industry is going towards.
So, Chris, you actually kind of took me to where I wanted to get to in actual fact. So it's not just about the skills, etc., that kind of attract people into the organization. Once the people are in the organization, it's also about the culture that you build, the culture, the belonging, which kind of talks to the leadership element that you were referencing. It's not necessarily just about, like we say, the skills. It's about what kind of culture you build for these individuals, right? And I think that's one of the important things. Once these individuals are in our environment, what kind of a culture are we supposed to build for them that kind of makes them feel included, like they belong to this and that they're working towards a purpose? And I think we kind of spoke of all of these elements in different comments already around the different questions I threw out to you as a panel. But give me a sense from your perspective about what kind of culture you build and what's the process you go about to build this kind of culture, that people feel they're part of the organization and they feel they're part of an organization that has a purpose that they want to work towards. Colin, I see your hands up.
Yes, yeah. So I see the panel is raising very interesting points. So, but in any case, let me maybe start with the culture. But the skills aspect is a very interesting topic. I hope we'll go further into it down the line. But in terms of culture, so culture is something that is very interesting in a sense that it always talks to doing what you say you will in the most practical sense, right? If ever, let's say, as Chris is raising a very interesting point to say leadership, if ever, let's say, the organization stand for, what can I say, disruption. So you are positioning yourself as a disruptor in the industry. right? You need to understand how do you build a culture of disruptors, right? You cannot be a disruptor in an industry and you have a culture of rigid decision making. You don't have culture of autonomy and innovation and creativity, right? If the CEO doesn't understand very well what problem are we solving, then we cannot solve it. You get my point. So culture speaks to, do you stand for what you say you stand for? And if ever a junior employee that you have hired today comes into the organization, does he see what you stand for at his operational level? Because remember, at strategic level, you speak about big ideas, bigger picture. But can your leadership team translate a bigger picture into executional plans that your junior employees that you're going to be sending down on the ground to build tools, to build the technology that you want to build, can they interpret it in such a way that when they stand afar, they'll be like, okay, the CEO has set the goal, that's the line of march, we're going to follow him. You get my point? With very few Steve Jobs who will say, I'm going to disrupt the market. I'm going to build an iPhone. And this is how phones are going to look like in the future. You get my point? So culture is a very interesting aspect. But maybe if ever you have to go one level deeper is, if you're going to be building a particular culture, right? Maybe let's say it's the culture of disruption. When you bring in new talent, do you have a way of integrating the new talent into the culture? Do you bring a Colin who comes from maybe a banking rigid industry into a startup environment where critical decisions can be made within hours, instead of going through maybe regulation that has to be reviewed over years or over weeks? How do you make Colin comfortable to say, dude, you can make this decision, it's fine. If ever we fail, we'll fail fast. You get my point? Do you pair him with a buddy? Are your onboarding frameworks designed to give Colin all the tools that he needs to make decisions faster? Because that's culture. You get my point? You can have all the material in the books, yearbook, and all that, but if ever like a person who's actually writing down your software that you're going to be selling to your customer cannot interpret what you're saying at a strategic level, then your culture will always be something that you communicate during your year-end functions, speech, and all that. But yeah, that's it for me.
Thanks, Colin. Yeah, so you kind of raised a point where people have these vision, missions, and the purpose, and it's something they put out at their year-end function, and that's what it's for. Or like I come from the banking environment, and one of the things that one of the leaders used to say is our purpose statement or our vision and our mission is not for the stakeholders, as in our shareholders. It is for our staff, or for it to be lived by our staff, so that we can attain what we need to attain as an organization. So it's not for the stakeholders or the shareholders. It's actually for us internally as an organization, for us to transform and move. But that being said, it also then shapes the culture, right? So that strategic mindset. And again, I think, Chris kept on mentioning earlier on, it's about the leadership. But it's leadership that builds the culture and runs that through the organization. So a very interesting concept that we've kind of introduced into mentorship programs is reverse mentorship. With the young individuals coming into the organization, they have a fair sense of how they want to be led, about what purpose that they want within the organization, how the culture in the organization should be shaped. But the only way for them to really get this shared with their leadership is to have a reverse mentorship. So to have that relationship where senior individuals in the organization listen to the younger generation, understand where they're coming from. And I think Chris also kind of mentioned this earlier on, is that while that's great, you've got to bring that balance between the two, right? How do we incorporate that into the environment? But at the same time, we have a business objective, and how do we create the balance between that? But the opportunities between the reverse mentorship allows the two generations, or the different generations, I should put it, to be able to communicate and find a level of balance between them, rather than one party trying to find the balance. Terence, I see your hands up. Let's give you the floor, Terence.
Thanks, Shane. Yeah, great point, Matt. And this reverse mentorship is a really cool method, to connect the business holistically. I always say that Your culture in your business is like a piece of land, right? And they'll always grow. Something will grow in that piece of land, right? But if you don't put the effort in, and you don't work the land, you don't plow it, you don't plant the seeds you would like to see, anything's going to grow there. It might be weeds, you might be lucky, it might be some nice flowers, but there'll always be a culture in your business, regardless of what you do. And I think that comes back to Chris's point that we are running short of great leaders. We just have to look at governments globally to understand, the leaders are not always ending up in the right places. But I think leadership is going to be a great challenge for organizations, and leaders then decide what is the type of culture that we need to execute on our strategy and to be a good corporate citizen in the world that we work in. And if you decide that, then you need to plant the seeds that you'd like to see. You need to nurture it. You need to take it down. And if you want a great culture, it doesn't always mean you do nice things. Sometimes you have to do tough things to create a good culture in your business. When you have the right culture, you then need to make sure that you attract the right talent into the business. And that's where people like Chris and our leaders play a really important role. And I call them the guardians of our galaxy, because they decide who comes into your business. And if you put a lamp outside, you're going to attract moths, right? And if you put a fire and some meat, you're going to attract some South Africans. And you put a box of tissues outside, you might attract a Man United supporter. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, but I think what you create will attract a certain type of person to your business, right? And that culture will then, if you have the right culture, you define it properly, you plant the seeds, you create that, you will then attract the right people to your business to execute on your strategy. And that is where people, leaders, need to be so involved. You need to have the situational awareness, you need to understand the business, you need to understand the strategy, and you need to have the trust from the leadership team to advise them and coach them on what is that strategy, what does it look like, what is the type of talent that will resonate with the culture that we have or don't have, and how do we plant the right seeds to attract the right type of people to our business.
Oh, fantastic. So yeah, you touched on a sore point there, and we won't go and revisit that with the Manchester fans. But I think the key point that you're making is what you put out into the market space and what people see is what actually brings the talent or the skills into your organization, and potentially is what kind of keeps them there. And it's like Google. Google, when it flashed exactly what they were doing, they attracted the right talent. They had to change their strategy later on. But by that time, they were already known to be an organization that attracts the young talent, gives people opportunities, empowers them. And we heard Colin talking about that as well, right? It's about that ability to bring the people in, but then to empower them, give them the opportunity to make the decisions that they need to make. So they're not necessarily coming into a world where they have to listen and follow orders all the time, right? But they're able to come in as decision makers as well, and it doesn't necessarily matter the level. So we need to build our structures in such a way that it kind of empowers individuals to be able to do the work that they love, right, and enjoy. And then obviously that then translates into the impact for the organization. So quite a few things that I'm kind of hearing from a culture perspective in terms of how we should be shaping the organization, how we should be thinking. But now, as much as we know all of these things and we're comfortable with all of this here, right? It's about creating the future-ready talent. And I think that's the next part I want to step into. We spoke about this earlier on, and it's about skilling individuals, right? But what is HR's role in skilling individuals, right? The environment is changing rapidly. I think it was Chris that mentioned earlier on, and it was yourself, Terence, that kind of said, like, listen, at the end of the day, as much as we go through ChatGPT 1, before you know it, you're already on ChatGPT 2 and ChatGPT 3, and then the qualifications haven't really moved. How are you thinking about skilling organizations so that the skills that we have in the organization is still relevant? So what are some of the strategies that you are using? Colin, I see your hand pop up there first, so let's open the floor to you.
Yeah, I think that's the question that I was waiting for.
Right.
Okay, cool. So, the skilling and how do we move into the future? So, one thing that maybe I need to sort of put out there is AI is going to be part of everything. literally everything that we're going to do going forward. So there is no industry that is not going to get AI going into the future. That's one thing that I wanted to put out there. So couple of things that organizations need to do are like as soon as yesterday is we need to start building the current and future skills taxonomy internally. You know, you can have two companies that are software engineering companies without the exact same type of taxonomy because they're servicing different client bases. It's very important. With AI now you can customize, right? The second thing is the 4B framework in terms of how do you build your skill needs to be there. You need to know what skills are you going to be building internally, what skills are you going to be procuring externally through external hire, and what skills are you going to be borrowing, meaning that temporarily hiring skills that are going to come and do certain things and exit, and then what skills are you going to be automating. You know, I think for companies and HR organizations that want to like dominate in terms of like bringing the best talent into the future, they're going to need to build that. And that to build now with AI is quite doable, because if ever you don't want to do like the heavy lifting of sitting down and writing everything else, Justin spoke about JDs, for example. You can take all the JDs that you have had in the past 20 years as an organization, work them into an AI and say, build me this, and then you can get that in a matter of minutes. And the sooner we do that, the much faster you're going to move. The other thing that we're going to have to look at is, are you going to be able to take whatever the upskilling that you're doing of your employees? For example, let's say you send a couple of employees to go learn AI, cloud, cybersecurity. Within the organization, are you building what you call something like a skill pod, but small short-term assignment to take those skills that people have learned and go apply them? A lot of us go to conferences, certifications, but when we come back, we add them to our CVs. But I've actually applied the skills that I've learned into my day-to-day work. I mean, one thing that I've seen as well when I was preparing for this is that we as HR, when we allocate maybe somebody's portfolio responsibility, we need to start thinking about what amount of time and capacity I'm going to allocate for this particular role into experimentation. Meaning that 10% for Colin's role as the head of platform safety need to allocate to experimentation. My experimentation can be learning a new skill, or going to learn a skill and go to finance and become a 3-month short-term exam work. Learn how, maybe for example, how to assess the balance sheet, for example, if ever that's the skill that I need to learn. But I must be able to be taken to go and experiment whatever the new skill that has been learned. And that's how organizations are going to build, going to the 4P framework that every organization must have internally. I think that's a very interesting topic.
Lovely, Colin. Thanks for that. Justin, I see your hand popping up. I'll give you the floor very shortly. Colin, I love that 4B to help you make your decisions, building internal capability, borrowing the skills, buying the skills, or what to automate, right? And I think those are the critical decisions as HR we kind of have to make around skills. And then when it comes to skills development, I love that. Also love the point around your skills portal. So from a point of example, right, I used to work for one of the banks, and what we used to do was we actually had a portal that we created called a skills cloud. So every time an individual used to go through the learning system and complete a qualification or complete a short learning program or anything of the sort, it started adding to his skills building portfolio. And that portfolio will then build into the skills cloud. And then any leader across the organization could literally get into the cloud and say, hey, listen, I've got this short-term project. I need a particular skill. And they could go and search for that skill and the capability. And if they found that individual, they could second that individual into the project team for the duration of that project. So yeah, kind of very innovative way of thinking. And it's nice to see quite a lot of organizations are thinking in this way, using technology to be able to advance the organization as well. Justin, let's give you the floor.
Yeah. So again, I think it rests on opportunity. Um, as I say, you can drag a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. So you can provide the opportunity, and it's really up to the individual to work out at which point in time they should be honing what type of skill. And we have an platform which has thousands of courses on it, and that's where AI can come in because the platform will read that you've shown an interest in this particular area, and then it starts recommending. So you can build those skills that you require at that point. Gone are the days where you join a company and because you had a BCom, you end up in finance, and that's for your banking background. And then you just merely continue for the next 30 years in finance because you had your BCom in the 60s. So, it becomes very, very different on the opportunity must be created and the individual then needs to also, with guidance, and the guidance can come from AI, the guidance can also come from your HR department looking at the future trends of the business and what skills are going to be required as the business evolves. In terms of Collins B strategy, it is a very good strategy and it's an extremely useful model to use to determine on particular jobs or skill sets what are we going to buy in? What are we going to build? What are we going to we have bounce where you move somebody to a particular different department or something like that. But I also think from an HR point of view, and I'd be interested to hear Colin, Terence, and Chris's view on the thing, but I think our employment models are often quite outdated. The world's moving towards project. Now, there are certain divisions within the companies or organizations that are going to be standard. But when you go into project-based work, you're not necessarily wanting to employ someone permanently. You want to be able to have flexibility and you can turn around and say to someone, look, I need 20 hours a week of your time and I need it for 12 months. And I'll pay you for those 20 hours. And this is what I require out of those 20 hours. And I especially the bigger organizations, I think they've been a bit slow to get on board with that type of employment where, when someone comes in, there's a position that goes open and the first thing everyone does is gravitate towards filling it with a permanent employee. But they haven't actually gone and had a proper look. Does that need a permanent employee or is there another way we can actually get this job done, but at a rate that is affordable and flexibility that we all know that we've got quite onerous labour laws. So, one has to work around how does this work for us. And just closing, I think, and it was said, now I'll show my age, but probably 25 years ago, Alvin Toffler came out with this learn, unlearn, and relearn. And I think that's really a phase we're all in. The learning is just digitally based. Your access to information is quicker. I'll give a bit of an anecdote. I remember now this really shows my age, when email first came in, and you'd sit there and you would send this email to the guy in the cubicle next to you, and then you'd run around and say, did you get it? And the guy would say, yes. These days, if you send me an email and I say I didn't get it, you walk away and say, that guy's not really honest. It's an accepted view that these things work. So, yeah, it's that type of thing that the future skills and learning, I don't think this learn, unlearn, and relearn mantra is going to actually leave us.
No, fantastic. And I think, Justin, you're kind of touching on the points you made earlier on as well. The way we shape our job descriptions, the way we put out our advertisements into the market space, the way we shape the roles. So that role, what would we call it? Role design, right? Or job design. it is critical, because if we understand the job itself and we start structuring it for the skill we need, it shapes the organization very differently in terms of its responsibilities to the employee. And leadership now is still not thinking fast enough to adapt to focusing on just particular skills. And it's more about the permanent employment. And I understand exactly what you're talking about, because let me just go and get the skill I need for the short-term project. Once the project is over, I'm not going to need that skill anymore. The individual can go back into the market space and take that skill to another organization that needs it, or in the process, they can go and rebuild their skill set to focus on whatever else the future is shaping towards. But it kind of removes that responsibility from the organization itself and places it on the individual. And I think you kind of mentioned that when you started. You can take a horse to water, but you can't force it to drink, right? At the same time, it's up to the individual. The individual has to continuously learn, unlearn, and relearn to continuously stay relevant in the market space, right? We as organizations, as much as we can do, we can create the tools, we can create the avenues, but then it's up to the individual to take the accountability to shape themselves as well. So quite a number of different points that you made there that I think were fantastic points. Colin, I'm going to jump over to you, and then we're going to start. Interestingly enough, colleagues, I told you the hour and a half is going to go really quickly. We literally have 8 minutes left. So Colin, I'm going to hand over to you, and then we'll start wrapping up the conversation.
100%. Justin, I don't know how many times I've said that you are very much correct. I mean, the point that you are raising is extremely important. You can force the horse to go to the river, you want horses to drink. But the point that you're making on the project-based work, you see, if many organizations can sit down and audit the utilization of their talent, they'll be very much surprised. A lot of talent is underutilized, literally. Right? You've got critical skills that are sitting in roles that are maybe a permanent job, right? But they're not even applying themselves up to 30% of their capacity. And this is the reason, one of the reasons why you see a lot of talent disengaged, and people are going through what we call quiet quitting, or people who are like disengaged from their jobs, not because they don't like what they're doing, but they're not 100% applied, or they're not over 80% applied, because you have got this job that you have to go to every morning. Whether you're working on the project or not, you're expected to be in the office, you're expected to be doing something. But is what you're doing applicable to the full capacity of the skills that you have? And what is organizations doing if ever you're not fully applied in terms of capacity? That's where like creativity in terms of short-term assignment. I mean, we're going into a situation where we're going to have to integrate AI into our HR's, skills, talent frameworks, so that AI can even suggest to say, Colin, as much as you may be involved in safety and order, but given the amount of skills and the demand we need in the organization, we think 20% of your capacity can be excellently utilized in, for example, project management. It means that now managers and leaders should be able to sit down and say, okay, cool, out of 100 engineers we have, we can actually allocate 20 engineers in R&D instead of just working on maintenance, for example. And this is where we have to like sort of start to move faster. Because if ever we don't catch up, you'll find yourself trying to hire 20 software developers, only to find out that the 14 that you have already are underutilized. You get my point. So yeah, but that's the point I wanted to make. So I agree with Justin. Project-based work is far much more effective than just hiring someone for everything. Because project-based, people are applying their skills in a particular outcome that is required, and then you can be able to measure their engagement as well.
Fantastic. Thanks, Colin. So while you were speaking, I was trying to get to what that terminology was when it comes to creating the right roles, etc. It's actually called job crafting. And it's about creating those jobs that are specifically required for a particular role, particular function. And it's the new terminology that's coming in terms of how do you job craft, right? But colleagues, we are at 5 minutes to go to the end of the session. And what I kind of want to do is to kind of touch on the leadership piece. Chris, you picked on it very early in the session, right? And I want you to kind of wrap your thoughts around and wrap your thoughts for the session itself around what kind of leadership styles are required for the evolving organizations that we have to lead, based on the skills that are coming in, based on the environment that we have to operate within. What style of leadership is required, and how do we need to evolve our leadership styles to get to that particular style? So yeah, let's get your final thoughts. And Chris, let's start with you.
I'll add a quick comment. I think if you look at the technology industry globally, everyone's going through a lot of transformation at the moment. Microsoft's cutting 9,000 jobs, Amazon's doing 3,000, etc., etc. Everyone's going through a lot of change, and it's not necessarily to cut down on revenue; it's to reinvest based on what's coming down the line. So, from a leadership perspective, it's pivotal that the leaders show exactly where the strategy, the vision, where everything is going, so everyone gets behind them. I can only speak for us as an organization. SAP, we're a software organization. We don't manufacture anything. We don't have anyone in factories. Everything comes from people. So the people that we put in place are people that are empathetic. They are on the ground with our employees in terms of understanding what they go through. But also, what people said earlier, it's an ever-changing environment. If you step into an hour organization, you think you're going to do the same thing tomorrow, it's just not going to happen. So probably then the environment is not for you. But I think that's when we go out, and skills or not, you want to look for people that has a vision, they have a vision, they understand where they want to take the business, they work with the people, they are empathetic, they're sentimental, but they're clear on the objectives and how we're going to manage the KPIs to get there.
Oh, fantastic. Thanks, Chris. Let's jump to Justin, your closing thoughts. You're still on mute, Justin.
That's when technology gets the better of you. Your mind works slower. I think from a leadership management, I think the starting point, and COVID did do, so it wasn't all negative, did do some positive work on it, and that is to learn to trust. Learn to trust your staff. Allow them to make mistakes, and to provide the support that is required to move on, readjust, and get on with the job. I think also to set challenging tasks, or to look for the strengths in your teams and to provide and work on those strengths. I think that leadership, and that's about understanding who are the people and what is the task at hand. And then just the last two would be, leaders need to be open to diverse views. And I think diverse views is what really drives a business to evolve and grow. The fact you've been there a long time doesn't mean you know it all. The landscape is changing. And lastly, the other trait I think a leader needs, or manager in today's environment, is to be collaborative and be able to pull in different areas for achieving different tasks.
Fantastic. Thanks, Justin. So colleagues, we are literally at the end of the session. I just want to check any more comments from the panel. Doesn't look like it. Fantastic. It'll give me the opportunity to say thank you. It has been an engaging session this afternoon. Fantastic insights coming through. Some very similar to other comments made on different panels from different sectors. But then there's a uniqueness that came through in some of the comments that you kind of mentioned, based on the technology sector and how quickly things are evolving, and how quickly you as an organization have to evolve with the changes that are happening in these sectors as well. Again, thank you, my dear panel members, Terence, Colin, Chris, Justin. We appreciate your views this afternoon. We'll reach out to you post the session to say a special thank you to you. And to the colleagues on the line, I really hope you took away some insights that you can take and apply in your work environment as well, listening to different organizations, the challenges that they are experiencing, and the pathways that they're navigating to overcome those challenges. So wishing you all well. Dear panel members, thank you. Dear colleagues online, thank you so much. And have a good afternoon further.